Hi YouTube, it's me Allie with Fire and Water Astrology. Today I'm going to be talking about the synastry aspect of the moon opposition Mars. Now I want you to remember that in synastry, the orb is very important to consider. So let's say the orb is 0 degrees. That's going to have a stronger effect within the relationship dynamic than an orb of 4 or 5 degrees. Also, synastry is basically the astrological compatibility rapport between two people. So when you put one person's birth chart and another person's birth chart together, when they interact with each other, when their planets interact with each other, it shows you the dynamic of the relationship, it shows you the purpose of the relationship, and it shows you the strength and weaknesses of the relationship. It can also indicate past lives. It can indicate if you've met before or if it's your first time meeting, if it's karmic, if it's more of a twin flame of relationship, I guess you can say, or soulmate relationship. But yes, so with an opposition is an aspect in astrology that indicates that the planets are approximately or are 180 degrees apart, which means that they are directly opposing each other, right? So when you look at an astrological wheel, and let's just say it's a traditional astrological wheel, let's start, first house is Aries, right? Right across from Aries is Libra. Same thing, all right? Right across from Taurus is Scorpio. Right across from Gemini is Sagittarius, right? Those are, each sign has their opposing sign. So typically, if, for example, let's say your moon is in Pisces and someone else's Mars is in Virgo, you're gonna have the moon opposition Mars aspect, because the Pisces constellation and the Virgo constellation are 180 degrees apart from each other. Now, oppositions are all about polarity, balancing energies. They're all about developing the awareness of others. It's all about trying to seek harmony, trying to seek resolution, trying to seek some form of balance and some form of, okay, this is where you shine, this is where I don't, and the areas that I shine in, you don't, and the areas that you shine, I don't. So it's kind of a lack thereof within each other, right? So one person may be 50% this and the other's 50% that, and it's kind of learning to balance those differences and align with the similarities that you guys have. A lot of the times, moon opposition Mars within synastry can come out a lot in arguments. You'll see this play out more so with communication, which is odd because Mercury's not involved. But here's why I say that. Mars is the planet of aggression. It's our drive. It's the way we assert ourselves. But it's also the way that we take action on our moon sign. So our moon sign is the things that we need to feel nurtured. It's the relationship we had with our maternal figure. Usually it's the biological one. Depending on the house can indicate otherwise, but the moon also represents our inner desires, our inner needs and wants. What we need to feel emotionally secure and emotionally satisfied. And when the moon makes an aspect in Synastry, it is basically now activating those emotional desires and those emotional needs and the emotional security that the moon person needs within a relationship. Now, the Mars is kind of how we as an individual act on those emotions, right? So the sun is kind of how, let me not use the sun for example. Mercury is how we communicate what the emotional needs and feelings of the moon are, right? It's how we logically express our emotions, what the moon feels. Mars is how we show and act on those feelings and on those feelings and on those emotional desires, or just on the feelings of either inadequacy, the emotional trauma responses we have to things, and just the way we move according to the feelings. So let's say, for example, someone has their moon in Cancer, right? Cancer moon is a very passive aggressive type energy if it was a Mars placement. But as a moon, it's a water moon, it's intuitive, it's sensitive, it's a cardinal, it has the leadership qualities, but there is that sensitivity and that intuitive nature and that need to have that stability, right? So if an individual with a moon in Cancer has a Mars in Aries, the way that the moon in Cancer feels about a certain situation is not how the moon in Cancer is going to act about that certain situation. Because Aries is fire, so how they act might be impulsive, erratic. Aries is emotional, but it's very quick emotion. And it has these outbursts and then it's back to normal and all of that. So that's kind of the energy I want you to recognize and kind of use as a metaphor within this synastry aspect. So the opposition just means that there's an alignment of one person's planet in their birth chart making 180 degrees to another person's personal planet. So this aspect can bring a mixture of both challenging and dynamic energies to a relationship. Oppositions always have challenges, but there's always this just exchange of dynamic energies, explosive energies at time, magnetic attraction, and these differences within the polarities, but that's kind of what attracts each other at first, because oppositions do that to people because of the energetic polarity. It pulls each other in, right? So the moon represents emotions, nurturing in the subconscious. Mars represents assertiveness, passion, and aggression. By the way, when I look down, I'm just referring to my notes, or I'm just thinking and trying to, So with this aspect, emotional interactions can become intense quite quickly, and they can experience, like, both people in this relationship can experience very strong but contrasting emotions. So how one feel the other may not, and then vice versa. And then the Mars person might think Moon's too sensitive, but then Moon might think Mars is too sensitive at one time, you know? So it's kind of this hypocritical thing with that, like, no, you. Have you ever seen that Spider-Man meme of them, like, pointing at each other? That's kind of the vibe, okay? Um, and this is because Mars represents how we express those emotions. So in turn, it can spark those intense emotional exchanges, right? So let's say the Moon person is expressing or trying to say something. I'll use like a personal example that I had, because I've had this aspect before, right? So I told this guy, like, I was just like, in this mood, I like to, I was like in the mood to like fight, you know, or like see a fight or something like that. And he was like, oh, that's so unattractive. And I just like kind of was like, oh, like, I just like shut up, like, you know. And I just instantly went like my energy just instantly became kind of like sad or whatever, like drained in a sense of like, oh, okay, like I was just such in a happy bubbly mood, like, oh my god, I want to see people fight, you know. This was like 2 years ago. I was like drunk and stuff, so I was just like not in my mind, and I was just like, you know, in this happy like bubbly state, you know. And to hear like, oh, that's so unattractive, that's so ugly, like that's so, like, you know, I'm like, okay, shit, damn, like, way to kill the vibe. And I was the Moon person, so Mars like did this thing where it made me kind of shut down, and then because of my emotional response, now Mars is irritated. Mars is like, oh, why are you acting like this? Like, why are you doing this? Like, now I don't even want to fucking be here. So now Mars is becoming like the sensitive person and all of this stuff. So it's such a weird dynamic between the two. And there's a lot of potential for conflict. And I feel like at times, like, you know, for example, when the Mars person would be like, oh, you're so sensitive, and then react to my emotional reaction, you know, in turn, the Mars person's being sensitive also, you know? And I think there's this moment that when these conflicts arise, that the two need to kind of realize, like, hey, like, is what I'm about to say or do, like, Mars needs to be like, is what I'm about to say or do necessary, considering what I've done in the past or how I've reacted in the past has caused this person to do this, you know? So it's kind of like taking a step back. And Moon needs to not poke the bear. There's this times where Mars may shut down, or whatever, you guys could be having a conversation, a topic brings up, Mars doesn't want to speak on it, the Moon person is gonna want to poke the bear, you know, gonna want to keep going and being like, no, like, what's wrong, like, what happened? Because with this opposition and with this aspect in general, there's a lot of triggers, emotional triggers, and it activates each other's emotional vulnerabilities. And Mars doesn't necessarily like this. So when Mars's emotional vulnerabilities are activated, remember, it's not, he or she is not the Moon person, right? The Mars person doesn't feel that comfortable being all emotionally expressive unless it becomes like intense. Then you'll see like, I feel like Mars has to escalate the situation to then get that emotional response that the moon was craving. The moon person has this need and desire to kind of connect with the Mars person, right? Because we're dealing with emotions and the way someone acts and their passions and how they maneuver throughout the world and whatnot. And the moon person wants to connect and understand why these things are happening, right? So the moon person has a tendency to kind of poke the bear to try to gain an emotional understanding. But by doing that, they're going to cause a reaction within the Mars person that can become explosive. And then the moon person might essentially pull back and withdraw and now kind of sadden. And then, you know, we got that thing where it's like, now Mars is gonna do the same thing. So there's this equilibrium that needs to be met. Balance is needed here, okay? So when tensions are running high, Mars has to pull back, and Moon should not continuously poke the bear just to try to meet their own emotional needs, okay? To get that emotional connection that the Moon person desires. So, like I said before, there is potential for conflict with oppositions. The aspect creates a polarity between the emotional needs of the Moon person and the action approach of the Mars. So we have opposition creates polarity. Polarity creates magnetism. Magnetism creates sexual tension and chemistry and attraction. Polarity of the opposition can create a push-pull dynamic. Constantly little bickers, constant maybe getting back together, and breakup makeup type thing, or if they aren't correctly polarized, there has to be a balance. This, like when two magnets are perfectly polarized, they automatically connect and attach to one another. But like when you try putting, let's say, the negative and the negative ends together, right, they're just gonna repel. So it's kind of finding that equilibrium within your own personal relationship, because for each of you guys, it's going to be completely different, right? So it's finding what you are doing wrong within the relationship that's causing these reactions out of the Mars. And if you're the Mars person, it's figuring out what's causing you to either push the Moon person away or put them in a state of feeling like they have to continuously gain some emotional connection or feel some emotional vulnerability from the Mars person. And I think that within every relationship that could look different, but there is gonna be a lot of sexual tension between the two. With this dynamic, it's kind of hard to keep these two apart, because although they have their differences, I think that's what draws them in. And there's just, with the Moon, there's always that, even if you're not the Moon person, but a Moon aspects in Synastry just have this draw, because it's like, oh my God, maybe this is the relationship that's going to meet my emotional needs, right? And with Mars there, it's like, with Mars in a Synastry aspect, it's like, oh my God, this might meet my sexual needs, so things of that nature. But there are growth through the challenges. This aspect brings room for personal growth. I think it's more so individual growth. I think if one of you guys are not into growing, learning, understanding oneself, and realizing these things, then it might not last. But maybe after the relationship ends, both of you guys are gonna kind of grow individually from that. It's like, wow, okay, well, what the hell happened there, but I think that there's like always going to be that individual growth, even if it's not a relationship that ends up in a breakup. I think it's something that like the individuals reflect on. If this is a person that like you can't get rid of them, like it's not like a relationship or something, or it is a serious relationship, let's say, that push-pull dynamic will continue until the two of you learn that balance and the two of you learn to grow. So despite potential conflict, the Moon opposition Mars aspect can provide opportunities for growth and transformation. And if both of you guys can acknowledge it and sit down and talk to each other about your needs and your wants and why Mars acts this way and why Moon acts this way and what Moon's trying to gain from the interaction that you guys just had and what Mars is like kind of feeling and why it's reacting that the person's reacting that way. There's a lot of room for transformation within the relationship. It can also bring unresolved emotional issues, which is what causes arguments or disputes or that push-pull dynamic. It's because it's bringing emotional issues and patterns to the surface, and although that can be kind of disruptive and it can be a reason why the two may not last, it could also be an inviting, like an invitation for healing and self-awareness and the development of better communication between the two. And it can also invite conflict resolution skill, but that has to come from both partners. It has to come from learning how to communicate and accepting your guys' differences. Because if that's not going to happen, you're not going to get very far. Key thing, the word opposition means that there are two opposing sides, right? But yet there is going to be that magnetic quality that draws you guys in. But there are going to be differences with how the planets interact. So that is something that you guys should know going into it. That there is going to, like, what you realize you don't, or let's say, like, things that the Mars or the Moon person does that causes arguments or whatever, you might subconsciously actually really like within that person, because it's a part of you that you don't have, or etc., or the way that the Moon person is able to be vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable, is something that the Mars person might lack and might find room to be like, okay, wow, like I lack this and this is something I need in my life. And the way that the Mars person takes action in life and in the relationship, the Moon person can be like, okay, wow, like this is something that I lack. And when noticing those differences and communicating that and appreciating that, then that's where you find that balance, that equilibrium, and that perfect polarity. When that polarity's off, the attraction is just not going to be there. The magnets are not going to connect. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video on Moon opposition Mars for Synastry. If you guys have any questions, please leave them down below. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and leave your video recommendations if you want to see any other videos. And yeah, I can't wait to see you guys next time and hear from you. And yeah, I love reading your guys' comments, so can't wait to hear from you guys then. I am doing readings, astrological birth chart readings, synastry readings. I get a lot more in depth, and after the reading I'm doing tomorrow, I'm going to put a demonstration of what I do. I get very in depth with the whole chart, or if you just want me to focus on one area of your chart, I do that as well. So you just email me. I'll leave my email, and I'll leave the Fire and Water Astrology Instagram below. I'll leave my email, and I'll leave my personal Instagram along with the Elixir Instagram. Elixir is the spiritual product, holistic product brand that I am in the works of making. So that should be coming soon. So until the website is up, I am taking reading inquiries through email. So email me your birth details, email me the questions that you need, email me what you're trying to gain out of the reading, and let me know what reading you would like. And that's all. Thank you, and have a good day, guys. Bye.